coming full-fledged with a helmet on my head with a shield and some sharp legs.
If you want to escape your life and hop into mine for 15 minutes, this is Tea Time with Trin. I'm your host, Trinity Tamara Jones, and this is my story. Let's get into it. So, I was born November 18th, 1999, which means my age correlates or corresponds to the number of year it is. So, it is 2025. I'm 25. Just keep that in mind as we go down this crazy timeline. So I was born into a split home. My parents were not together in my lifetime. And, that was the norm for me, going back and forth. I remember living with my dad full time as a kid. After my toddler years, I was with him full time. And that household was very religious. So I thought at the time. It was mandatory for us to go to church, and, as a kid, church isn't necessarily, fun, and I don't want to speak for all kids, because I know that there are children who understand church, who know why they're going, but for the most part, kids just want to play, I wasn't too fond of that rule, but I couldn't stay home, and didn't have a choice in the matter, so I went. And, I was physically there, but never mentally there. And, I kind of grew a resentment towards the church and my dad. And just like that rule. It was very subtle. It wasn't, on the forefront of my mind. It was kind of just like every Sunday I would get irritated and then just hold on to that irritation because I didn't understand it, and I'm a kid. So I grew a little resentment, and I feel like that played a role as to why I didn't want to believe in anything. I don't like to be forced to do anything, so it kind of just like made me want to be distant. When I would go home to my mom's, my mom was spiritual. She knew Christ. She spoke to God. She walked with him. She was not really a church goer. We didn't have a home church. I remember going with her a few times, and there was this one experience where it was one of those auditorium, stadium type of churches, and cameras, lights, TV, super theatrical. And I remember going to children's church during that, time with these kids that it wasn't very uncomfortable. I remember that. We didn't learn anything that had to do with God or anything that had to do with church. We sang Lion King songs. I vividly remember jumping up and down and singing, "Oh, I just can't wait to be king." And, that was cool. That was cool. But I also knew, like, what church was at the time. Like, and I knew, like, okay, they're just babysitting me. Like, this isn't really church. So, yeah, that was that experience. And then, my dad's home church, which is now my home church, by choice, was, more on the churchy side. It was more about Jesus, and, it's, predominantly Black, and yeah, it's such a good church, and we'll get into that later on, but, yeah, that's my experience with the church at a very, 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 very young age. Moving forward, school, I moved in with my mom full time about 9 years old. I moved in with her full time. So I was going back and forth to see my dad on weekends and, holidays, summer, things like that. But for the most part, I was with my mom, going to school with my mom. And I remember it coming up in like a class, not necessarily a teacher, but it was like amongst the students and us discussing kind of, I believe it was either like science. That's typically when it gets talked about. And it was talked about in school on multiple occasions. Again, amongst the students and not teachers. But I remember being vocal about it for the first time in like middle school. I was like, yeah, I don't believe like in that or in anything really. I believed in science and, evolution and things like that. But I didn't believe in God, didn't believe in Jesus, wasn't a Christian, didn't like claim it. Not to my family, I wasn't vocal about it, but definitely like outside, I was. And, I remember that being the case, for the most part until I was about 16. And then I got vocal with my mom. And she took me to lunch or brunch at Mimi's Cafe in Long Beach. And I confessed and I told her, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in Jesus Christ. I don't believe in anything, really. I was on the borderline of atheism, so I thought. But yeah, I told her that, and she kind of just, I remember her being taken back. She was a little shocked. And then she just started to talk to me about what God has done for her and, her reasons for believing in him and her personal experiences with him. And that really moved me. It moved me enough to get curious, and I believed her. I mean, her stories were so, I wanted to share them, but they're not mine to share, but they were so powerful, and I was just in awe, honestly. And I started to become curious after that. But it definitely didn't just, change my mind. I was like, oh yeah, I believe now. Like, it doesn't work like that. My transformation from being a non-believer to a believer was a process, and it took some years. It was not an overnight decision. So after that brunch, I remember I want to say, so I'm 16, I'm sophomore going into junior year. I remember having a boyfriend, and that was, crashing and failing. I remember my friend group was crashing and failing. I remember my grades were crashing and failing. Everything around me, was just going to turmoil. And if you can think of a teenager at rock bottom, that's what it was. Nothing in my life was going smoothly at all. And on top of that, I didn't know at the time, but on top of that, I deal with depression. Sadness is my main emotion. And that just everything going wrong in your life definitely can put you in a state of solitude and darkness. And that's where I was. It was painful. I just remember being so sad and kind of just done. I wanted to give up in life, and nothing was peaceful in my life at the time. And it's crazy to think of a teenager hitting rock bottom, but that was a teenager's version of rock bottom. School's not going well, friends not going well, boy problems, you don't feel good about yourself, your self-esteem is super low, you're insecure, you're depressed. I was just going through it, and I remember not wanting to live. I remember having the most suicidal thoughts, and I just didn't feel the need to be here. I didn't have meaning, didn't have purpose. I didn't feel like it was necessary for me to keep breathing. So I felt that way, but never had the courage to actually commit the act. I guess fear kind of takes you and pulls you away from that. I was harming myself, and my mom knew about it. So I would do, self-inflicting things, but they wouldn't be fatal. It would just be to I needed physical pain to take away from the emotional internal pain that I was feeling, that it was just too overwhelming. And I remember being in my room, it was pitch black, and I was just sobbing on my bed, just sobbing, just uncontrollably crying out to anyone, to anything. I needed help, and I knew I needed help. And I remember just wailing, oh my goodness, I don't know how no one either heard me or didn't come up in concern, but I was going through it, and I was like rocking back and forth in this dark room. Like, yeah, you would think I was crazy. Like, I was in a state of just darkness. And I remember getting so vulnerable and surrendering to just anything. You know, I didn't really know, because I didn't really believe, but I knew of God. I knew of Jesus Christ. I knew of believers. I knew, my mom's testimonies. And I was kind of just getting more and more curious. So I was crying out to God in more of like, not like with confidence that he would respond or answer, because I didn't actually believe fully. It was more of just like, let me test this. Let me see. So yeah, I was crying out to him. And I remember just like, don't remember verbatim word for word, but I just remember, if you're there, if you're real, like if can you just help me? Like I need help. I sought him. I sought God. And as I was crying out to him, my eyes are closed, tears are flowing. I'm kind of hyperventilating in a way, my breathing's very rapid and just uneasy. And I remember crying out and not really thinking that anyone would show up. And it was like instant. Like, my eyes were closed, head down, bawling. And the next thing you know, I see light in a dark room with my eyes closed. I see light, like this white with a hint of like yellowish light, just like a glow. And immediately feel this embrace, this like warmth. And it's not like I'm feeling actual arms around me. I just feel energy. It's like this surge of energy that wasn't mine. And I knew it wasn't mine. It wasn't familiar at the time. And I just remember crying out in relief after that. Like, I knew that it was God. I knew that, I just knew it. I don't even know how, because I never felt him prior to that. I just knew it. And it's crazy because it's in his word. You seek him and he will show up. And that's exactly what happened. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that what his word was at the time. So learning that, years later and looking back on it, it really blew my mind. But he showed up for me. He showed up for me when I didn't believe in him. And I'll never let that go. Because that's who he is. He shows up for those no matter what, because he loves you, whether you believe in him or not. It was life-changing for me in that moment. Again, it wasn't a switch. It wasn't like, okay, now I believe. But I definitely was 10 times closer to that than prior to that experience. At that point, it was no doubt about it. God is real. And I feel like the next part was learning Jesus Christ. But in that moment, I knew, like, okay, all right, I do have a creator, and my creator loves me, because I am not deserving of this warm embrace right now, like, at all. And he did it anyway, because he's so good, and I'll never let that go. So, that happened, and then I felt peace. Everything in my life was still chaotic, but I was internally at peace. And, I just continued to live my life. 17 years old, I was graduating high school. And I wasn't really, digging into Christianity at the time. I was so focused on school. My friend group was still falling apart. I didn't have friends my senior year. It's not like I didn't have friends. I had friends. I didn't have a close friend group. I was very much focused on just college. And yeah, it wasn't until I graduated from high school, moved in with my mom, just me and my mom. I remember getting involved kind of romantically with someone who also didn't believe in Jesus Christ or Christianity. Now, at the time, it wasn't like I didn't believe. I definitely believed in something. Didn't exactly know what, but I know it was God. And, everyone has a God. So I was trying to figure out what God embraced me, because that's the God that I want to worship and praise. So yeah, he believed in something else, more on the Egyptian sun and moon side. And I was curious about that viewpoint and, dabbled in it a little bit, did as much research as I felt like. And, it just wasn't fulfilling that void, that embrace that I felt, that energy. It just, it didn't give. So, things fell off with him anyway, and I continued on with my life and just working. I remember I was transitioning into moving in with my best friend, and it was just really good times, struggles, but good times. So we ended up doing that, saved enough to get our place together, and I was 18 when we moved into our first place together. And I just had a lot of time, to reflect on myself and my life. I was just working and going home at the time. School was not a priority anymore. I pretty much fell off. And I was just trying to find my way, trying to find myself. And I started to really dig at that point. I started to dig into Christianity, and I started asking my dad questions. I started praise dancing. I was praise dancing when I was, in the church, younger. And I didn't, I wasn't doing it for the right reasons. I had no idea I was a kid. I was just dancing because it was fun. So once I, got to that point where I was ready to get back into the church, and, I was seeking Christ and I was moving in that direction, I joined the dance team for the right reasons. And I loved that time of my life. Oh my goodness, it was the best. I miss it so much. And I know I can do it here, and I am, actually. I can't wait for that. But yeah, praise dancing is a huge part of my life, and I want to keep it. And I know that it's my gift, one of, and yeah, it means the world to me. And I can't wait to show you, what I've been working on and what God has put on my heart. My dad has been the biggest influence and has helped the most in my journey with Christ, to get me there. And then the second I got baptized, June 2019, it was kind of a send-off. My dad, he did the baptism. And then after that, my journey walking with God really, really began. And from 2019 to the present day, I've been renewing and transforming myself and those around me by being an example. I'm so focused on mind renewal and transforming my life, making wise, godly choices, and, losing self-life, being more intentional and aware of my characteristics and what I'm showing to the world and what I'm giving, the energy that I'm giving out to everybody around me. I'm very focused on being the best version of myself, and I'm being the the being that God intended us to be. You know, he just wants you to choose that way. And I've chosen. And nothing can take it away. Nothing can stop it from happening. This movement is moving. And I really just want other people who are in that curious stage. I want to be there for them, and I want to help them. And that's what I'm here for, is to get those who are kind of just like in that stage of uncertainty. I want to make you real certain. And not me. That sounds like very aggressive. I don't want to make you, but I definitely want to be of help and of assistance for you if need be. And that's what Tea Time with Trinn is. It's just a community to help those who want to know, or to be with those who are in the midst of mind renewal and transforming their lives. I want us all to commune and to fellowship and, you know, share our testimonies and just praise God. And that's what it's about. And I can't wait to see it grow. I can't wait to see God, you know, do his thing with this community. I'm extremely excited. I appreciate you all for listening. This episode was a little bit longer than 15 minutes, but again, I appreciate you. I love you all, and join the community, be a part of this movement, share with friends and family, and God bless.
Born again believers, you better beware. The enemy is riding, get out of your chair. The call is for brothers and sisters of warfare. Step to this battle full armor to bear.